Dan Lanning is changing college football. No, really.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This might be my favorite show ever. Yes, it is that time. Once again for Locked On Ducks, I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. The offensive line is not good, it's great. And was Saturday the best that Oregon can be? All coming up on today's show. But when I say that Dan Lanning is changing college football, I'm not being sarcastic. I'm almost laughing because this is the most hilariously awesome thing an Oregon coach has ever done. So Pete Nako's reporting, who I have an objection to in just a moment, that the NCAA is actively engaged in making an in-season action after Lanning took advantage of the 12 men on the field loophole. I will emphasize here, Oregon did not violate a rule. They had 12 men on the field, and they were flagged for it. And there was a risk that was taken with that, which I'll get to in just a second. But because Dan Lanning then went to his presser, now the NCAA was certainly going to take a look at this either way, because a lot of people had figured out, hey, I think Oregon did this 12-man thing on purpose. Lanning then, in his Monday press conference, is holding back a smile. This might be the greatest Lanning moment ever. That this is how he beat Ohio State to get his signature win is just phenomenal. It's just phenomenal. So he's asked about it in his presser, and he says there are a lot, I'm paraphrasing here, well, there are a lot of unique situations, and that was one of them. And everyone was like, oh, wait a minute. So this was on purpose? Now, I understand, and if you asked me to vote, I would vote yes on changing this rule. However, because no, you should not be able to put an extra guy on the field and just burn clock in that situation. But guess what? Lanning was not doing anything wrong. The officials handled the play correctly. Now, what I object to with Pete Nakos' piece here in his second article over at on3.com, which you can go read, he says NCAA rules currently do not require the clock to be reset after a 12-man penalty is called. The NCAA is now evaluating in-season action after the controversial call impacted Oregon's win over Ohio State. What is controversial about this? It's brilliant. This isn't a controversy. This isn't, well, did they handle it correctly? Oh, and then later in the piece, he does say the Big Ten crew officiating the game did handle the play correctly, a source said. Yeah, they did. But Dan Lanning, being such a sicko, such a Mad Hatter in the lab genius, to go out and have this on hand to say, hey, wait, let's call a timeout. We worked on this. We're going to put 12 guys on the field. They're not going to be able to get a big play. And we're going to run off 4 seconds of the clock. And then Will Howard, we know what happened from there. This is the greatest thing that Dan Lanning has ever done. It is as hilarious as it is brilliant. And it is absolutely within the grounds of legal college football action. This is not cheating. I don't even think this is dirty. This is just being smart. John Canzano wrote, and I think accurately, it's not as any bit as dirty as Ohio State rushing up to the line to get the snap off before the replay review can buzz down and say, hey, that's an interception. That's what the rule is. If you're playing the game the way the rule's written and you want to change the rule, if you want to change the rule, that's okay. But this is done within the structure of a completely legal framework, and might I add, to have thought of this, you have to think about football every day. I mean, I've never even heard of this. This is some Belichick stuff. It truly is, because he found a loophole in the rules to run out the clock one time on Monday Night Football against the Jets. And one of you sent me a message that Mike Vrabel did the same thing to Bill Belichick a couple of years ago, and the NFL changed the rules. It's not a dirty move by the coach. It's just being smart and taking advantage of the way the rules are written and playing within the confines and restrictions of those rules. And by the way, Oregon was flagged. And Oregon did have to give up 5 yards, but they were willing to give up 5 yards in exchange for 4 to 5 seconds going off the clock. They got 4 off, and every single second counted there. So that's the first thing. Like, this is just... It's too funny to be true, but it's completely legitimate. Now, on the flip side, for those that would take a negative angle of this, there is 100% a risk involved. Let's say, for instance, on that play where Oregon puts a 12th man on the field. I still can't believe that's real. It's just so awesome. That Oregon puts a 12th man on the field and Will Howard throws away from the crowd and towards Jabbar Muhammad as he did, who comes up and makes a dynamite play defensively and just swats the ball down. What if he had intercepted that ball? If he intercepts that ball, 12 men on the field, game is not over. Dan Lanning is buffoon rather than genius. And he would never indicate that they did it intentionally, and he'd have some cover for that. And it would just be, yeah, we made a substitution mistake. Guy went on the field, he wasn't supposed to. That's on me and the coaching staff. That's what it would have been. But there was risk involved there, and it absolutely paid off. I don't know why the word controversial is in Pete Nakos' piece here. Like, you did something that is legal and brilliant. That's like saying, well, that controversial RPO offense. Like, what do you mean controversial? Well, no one's done it before. Okay, that doesn't make it controversial. That makes it new. That makes it different. That makes it a strategy. It doesn't make it controversial. So I don't think that's the correct interpretation. But the exact quote from Lanning, by the way, again in this piece from Pete Nakos of On3, quote, "We spend an inordinate amount of time on situations, and some situations don't come up very often in college football, but this was obviously something we had worked on. You can see the result." That's so good. That is so phenomenally good. And do I think that it is wise to change the rule? Yeah, because I wouldn't want other teams to have done this to Oregon, because I'd say there's a brilliant strategic move. Wait, why is the rule written that way? Wait, why is it? But the rule is written that way. And after Oregon did it successfully, I wouldn't want someone else to be able to do it to Oregon. So Dan Lanning is forcing rule changes in college football because he sits in a lab and somehow between recruiting and game planning and raising 3 kids, man, he found a way to realize, hey, if we are trying to kill clock and we can give up a few yards but don't want to give up a lot, what if we put a 12th man on the field? Clock's not going to run. It's a fault of the NCAA, not a fault of Dan Lanning. In fact, it's a credit to Dan Lanning. That is some crazy, detail-oriented, sicko behavior, and I'm so here for it. I am one. As you can see on my face on YouTube, this is the most hilarious thing I've ever talked about on the show, and I think it's great. Dan, the man. Indeed, he is. Let me know your thoughts in the YouTube comments or hit me up on X, formerly known as Twitter. Oregon's offensive line, great on Saturday. Not good, great. They should have 0, and I mean 0 doubts. Right? That's coming up next. First, this episode brought to you by Game Time, which has a feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to your favorite teams to allow you to watch them play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, whatever you're looking for. They've got all-in pricing. Toggling this feature shows the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout, which is the worst part of buying tickets to literally anything. You toggle that feature on, boom, don't have to worry about it. You see it up front. And their lowest price guarantee is guaranteed, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That's Locked On College for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It is game time. I don't even know how you think of that stuff, man. How does he... That's so awesome. Football coaches are great. As someone who has the privilege every week to talk to Division I head coaches, understanding the level of knowledge required to be in that position at any level is so cool. It's one of the coolest parts about my play-by-play job with Southern Utah is seeing how often these coaches think about situations you'd never imagine, stats that you have to know, how to do this, what the technique is. Like, it's awesome. It's awesome. Mailbag time. YouTube comments, X, formerly known as Twitter, at @McLaughlin CFB or at Locked On Ducks. Or if you want priority access and all sorts of other perks, you can become a Locked On Ducks insider. Link in the description below. Wherever you listen to or watch the show, you can get a free 14-day trial. The flock has been growing over there. A lot of people are benefiting, including, but not limited to, Bud, who asks, against Ohio State, our offensive line made it 4 straight games without allowing a sack. They improved after the brutal start to the season, 7 sacks in 2 games. Do you expect this to continue? 100%. 100%. Because I had not doubts, but questions, which are 2 different things, about Oregon's offensive line going into this game. They had not created explosive running plays consistently in the first few games. And then they did it against Michigan State. And I said, okay, is that the anomaly, or is that going to become the norm? Well, if you can get Jordan James over 100 yards, you can create explosives on other teams, because most teams Oregon's going to play this year, including Purdue later this week, are not going to be loaded with NFL guys on the other side of the ball. And I'll get into the Boilermakers. Send me all the questions that you've got, and I'll dive into them and answer them here on the show, as always. But that Ohio State team was every bit as good as I thought they were. Will Howard looks like a completely different player than what he was at Kansas State because he has great support around him. The defense, they're physical. And if you notice, Jordan James had a really good day and outran the Ohio State running backs by just a little, and Oregon kept Quinshon Judkins in check, which is a really, really impressive thing to do. But for Oregon's offensive line to have the amount of success they had and allow 0 sacks for Dylan Gabriel, that's an incredible accomplishment. It was great to see against Oregon State. They finally figured it out, and everyone went, oh, okay, this is what this offense can really look like. And then against UCLA, it was, oh, okay, they did it against a bad Big Ten team, but hey, at least they did it, as it looked as they should. Then they did it against Michigan State, and you're like, okay, this is a positive trend, but I want to see a test. There is no defensive front that is going to be better than the one Ohio State put on the field. Michigan State, just Michigan, poses a different sort of challenge. Their interior guys are better than their edge players. I think Ohio State's edge guys are better than their interior, but both units are extremely talented. And if you can have that sort of success against Ohio State, you can have it against anybody in the country. So I have full faith in the offensive line going forward. Nishad Strother's really good. Poncho's playing great. Marcus Harper, we know how solid he is, and the 2 NFL tackles are living up to that billing. Bud also asks, our red zone offense was already an area of some concern after Gabriel's recent interceptions. Failing to score on 1 of 5 trips and settling for 2 field goals now drops Oregon to tied for 73rd in touchdown rate in the red zone this season. How can this be fixed? This is going to sound incredibly simple. This is all it comes down to. Execution in the red zone and making the right reads. And Dylan Gabriel took a step forward, stopped throwing interceptions. Had to do that against Ohio State. They won the football game. Next step, be even more efficient. Be even better. The matching between offensive coordinator and quarterback always has to be good. It has to be at its best in the red zone. Everything is condensed. Everything is tougher. Here's the good news, though. Oregon didn't have its best game in the red zone ever against Ohio State. The empty possession, couple field goal tries. Still won the football game. Still had 32 points. Because they're creating explosives. So that doesn't need to move to be one of the 25 best in the entire country. But it is literally as simple. Any coach you talk to, execution. You've got to be able to identify coverage and make the right reads at any point in the field. But you can get away with it a little more back at the 50-yard line. Safeties are deeper. You have more room to work with. Down in the red zone area, it's all condensed. And if you don't make the right read on time, you're done. You're done because somebody is going to be right next to that guy because everyone's closer down to the line of scrimmage and more condensed. So, last question from Bud. Why are the special teams a struggle? It's been a struggle for college football teams for a long time. Go figure. I'm not even trying to blow off the question because I think it's ridiculous. It's frustrating that Oregon special teams, again, aren't good. There is something about college sports. It is an incredibly mentally draining thing to be on special teams, particularly kicking field goals. But we've seen it with punts as well. Go back to the Oregon State game in 2022. Guy drops a punt at the 1 yard line. Why? He's nervous. It's the difference between sideline reporting and play-by-play. Sideline reporting in many ways is much tougher. Why? You don't have as many opportunities. So when you do get there, you feel a heightened sense of pressure. You just have to find that mental hurdle to get over. You have to find whatever clicks for you so that you're completely dialed in and focused, and Oregon didn't have that on Saturday. It almost cost them the game. Shout out to Kenyon Sadiq for running a guy down and Luke Basso for making the stop after the hold went awry and he threw it over his head in the end zone, and then Ohio State almost ran that back for 2 points. That almost cost Oregon the game. It was a game-saving play looking back on it that Ohio State didn't get 2 points. Can't have that again going forward. I'll talk more on that a little bit later. Another Locked On Ducks insider asks, how many points did Oregon leave on the field against Ohio State? You've got the 2 from the extra points, because I don't think they go for 2 if they don't miss the first extra point. So 2 there, and I'd say 3 because I would have kicked the field goal when they went for it on 4th and goal. Yes, Tez Johnson's wide open, but that is the risk you run with that particular decision. Is it comes down to reads and timing, and it's not as easy to make those decisions down there in a timely manner. So at least 5. Bare minimum, 5 points. Maximum, execute the 2-point and the extra point, and that'd be 6. And if you had the touchdown, 7 more. Not third. Anyway, 5. 5 is the answer to that question. Didn't kick a field goal, missed 2 extra points, left 5 points on the field. That's how many I'd say is the baseline number. It's as many as 13 or 14, but it's 5. And I think that that's a really good sign. I'm gonna come back to that a little bit later. This question from Dylan. Is this the best run defense in Oregon history? Look what we did to Ohio State's run-heavy offense with incredible backs. Look what the Beavers have done to teams. Yes, not great competition. Look how much worse Genty has gotten against other teams. Michigan State, another solid rushing attack. Third and final question, because he had 2 from yesterday. Is this the best tackle duo Oregon's ever had? And lastly, is this the worst PAT unit we've ever had? Oregon's missed 3 PATs in 6 games. Actually kicking, not counting the unsuccessful 2-point conversion try against Ohio State. Can't remember a time where they missed 3 in a 6-game stretch. So maybe. Would love for that to get cleaned up. On the rushing easy question on the tackles. Yes, best tackle duo I've ever seen. Penei Sewell was a part of a great offensive line. His right tackle, I think, was Calvin Throckmorton. Someone can correct me if I am wrong. That tandem has definitely got consideration, but Connerly and Cornelius are so good. They're going to the NFL after this year. They're going to make plenty of money doing so as well. Is it the best run defense in Oregon history? Too early to say. It's too early in the season. I know that they've done a really good job in most of their games, except for a handful of carries against Ashton Genty. And then I'll talk about that more in just a sec. They've been really good. Exceptionally good stopping the run this year. It's all Oregon could really ask for, but they have had a tendency to allow the big run. So, Jeff Schwartz had a point going into the Ohio State game hey, the Ashton Genty runs were, 3 yards or fewer most of the time, and then he broke some big ones. It's a valid point to make because that is different than, hey, it was 6, then it was 8, then it was 12, then it was 4, then it was 5, then it was 6. It is different than that. No question. Oregon still clearly has issues sometimes in run fits from the safety position that allow for big gains on the ground. Travion Henderson had, I think it was the 50-yard one, but Quinshon Judkins didn't break a long run. Guess what? He was, 29 yards rushing? 29 yards rushing from one of the most dynamic backs in all of college football. It's pretty darn good. So it's too early to say if it's the best in Oregon history. But what matters right now is that the defense has been really good, and it should have the confidence of Oregon fans. You should not go into a game saying, well, they might be able to run the ball. Well, you got to be good enough to break a long run. Either have the best running back in the country or one of the best running backs in the country on one of the best teams in the country, or you're not going to run the football. I don't know how much better that can get. We'll see where the numbers stack up at the end of the season, but I think the run defense is more than good enough. Man, that offensive tackles question's tough because Panay was freakishly good. Like, there was a statistical impact of him on the field in points per game and yards per play and him not on the field. Do Connerly and Cornelius have that sort of impact? I hope we never find out, because that means one of them would get injured. So I'll say yes, but it's closer to a 1A, 1B because Panay is the best offensive lineman probably to ever come out of Oregon, at least in my lifetime. There have been some really good ones. Max Unger, stud. Panay Sewell, probably the best one. Great questions. And we've got more of them coming. So make sure you stick around because someone says he's got a serious question. Someone's got another question. And what should happen with Traeshon Holden? That's all coming up next. First, let's talk about FanDuel. NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. Did you bet Oregon plus 3.5? If so, Johnny Manziel, money fingers time, because Oregon covered that with the outright win. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. So what are you waiting for? Check them out at the #1, not number 2, but #1 sportsbook in America. They're over there at FanDuel.com. One more thought on how many points did Oregon leave on the board on Saturday. I didn't feel like the offense missed a ton. There were the execution things I talked about. I'm still thinking about, what if Ohio State doesn't get the early 7 points? What if? But like, where else did the offense have a huge missed opportunity? Yeah, the 4th and goal. Okay. I'd rather kick field goal. But again, that's fine. Like, being a little aggressive, rolling the dice, not the worst thing in the world. I said before that play I wanted to kick, and that's why. But it's a really good situation, which leads me into this particular question. This from Nick. So, serious question. Noted. Put on my serious face. Sorry, I don't mean to mock you, Nick. But sometimes I have a little fun. If you can't laugh at yourself, I probably don't want to be around you, because I got to tell you, I laugh at myself every single day because I'm kind of a doofus. Prior to Ohio State, Oregon fans have been saying the scores have been lower and play less explosive and exciting because they were holding back. Question, do you believe that assertion? If so, do you think we're going to see an offense more like the last 2 years going forward? Sorry, it's a long setup. Feel free to paraphrase. Thank you. No sweat. That wasn't that long of a question. Believe it or not, I've gotten questions much longer than that. But to answer your question, Nick, no, I don't think they were holding back, so to speak, in a significant way. There might have been a couple of plays or concepts that they introduced for Ohio State. That's not uncommon. You know, back in the day when Chip Kelly was Oregon's head coach, they would come out and run the same concepts every week, but do it from different formations and then just run it at warp speed. But it looked different every week. So if you go look at, the formations Oregon used in the Washington game that year, for instance, it looks different than the national championship game against Auburn. And offenses will always make those sorts of tweaks depending on what the matchups are. And so Oregon in this game, I think, saw early on that Ohio State had watched the film, no surprise, and seen that Oregon likes to throw the ball over the middle. They like to throw it short. They play a lot in the RPO game. And Oregon's counter to that was a very good one. And this is where game planning comes into play from Will Stein and company. They said, well, if you're going to give us shots on the outside, we feel like we've got the horses to take them. And so there were a lot of downfield shots, and we hadn't seen necessarily that many all the time, but I think it shows you why so many, myself included, are high in this Oregon offense. They can be whatever they want. Gabriel showed the ability to push the ball down the field. I was singing his praises for that and many other things on yesterday's show. Check it out if you have not already. But they're also able to run the ball. They can control the clock a little. They can run the RPO. They can push it down the field. They can use the entire field as well. I don't think it was, hey, we're not going to take a lot of deep shots until Ohio State. It was, hey, this is how we want to play offense. But if you make this sort of change and you give us one-on-one shots on the outside, then we're going to do that. But Oregon State, for instance, wasn't doing that. Oregon State was dead set on not giving up the big play because they knew we don't have corners that can run with Evan Stewart, Tez Johnson, and Traeshon Holden. And guess what? They didn't. So what did Oregon do? If you're going to play soft on the outside, we'll take 10 yards. We'll take 15 yards. We'll take 8 yards. That's fine. We'll just move the ball down the field in smaller chunk plays. So I think Will Stein has been really good, and it feels only honest to throw this out there. His profile to be a head coaching candidate in the offseason, it goes up when you win games like Ohio State. And if Oregon gets to the playoff and makes a run, he'll get phone calls because he's been really good. But the other point that I've kind of been leading up to right here that I wanted to make is Oregon did leave points on the board on Saturday, or left them on the field. Oregon did not play an entirely clean game. Ohio State got a significant break from the officiating crew, and Oregon still won the game. Now, Oregon was at home. If that game isn't played at Autzen, not sure Oregon finds a way to win. But they did. That's all that matters, of course. But if Oregon were to rematch with Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game, I'd feel pretty good about their chances right now. If, and only if, they can clean that sort of stuff up. I think those mistakes were canceled out by the home field advantage, which was incredible, by the way. But was that the best Oregon could possibly play? No. Did they play really well? Yes. But that was an A- game. What does their A+ game look like? They win that game by 10? What if the replay isn't there? If you get replay on the Jeff Bossa interception and Oregon plays a slightly cleaner game and takes a field goal, they might win that game by 10 points. And then it'd be an even more impressive win. It's already an incredibly impressive win, headlined by the madman genius that is our boy, the Danimal, Dan Lanning, of course. But do I feel like Oregon unlock something that they didn't have the potential of or that they had shown glimpses of before? Not necessarily. I think they just adapted to what their opponent was doing very, very well. And that's a credit to the coaching staff. They were fantastic. Oregon moved the ball the entire game. They had, over 500 yards of offense against Ohio State, who hadn't played anybody this year. They're still allowing, 7 points a game. They allowed more rushing yards, I think, in the first half than they allowed on average this season. And Oregon looks up at the end of the game and finishes with, wait for it, 496 yards of total offense, 6 of 14 on third down. By the way, shout out the Oregon defense on third down, 4 of 12 they held Ohio State. That's a great number against a really good offense with a great coordinator in Chip Kelly. That's a very good Ohio State team. I don't think they're going to lose a game the rest of the year. I don't think Oregon's going to lose a game the rest of the year. And I think they're bound for a collision course in the Big Ten championship game. But if Oregon will want to win that one, they'll have to play cleaner. But if they do, very capable of winning because I think they played really well, but can still unlock that next gear. It's just that if they can play imperfectly and beat Ohio State, they can beat anybody. Mighty Oregon asks, hey Spencer, mailbag question. Can you please talk about how loud Oregon fans are? Look at me, I'm an Ohio State fan at Autzen from Saturday. For those listening on podcasts and not watching on YouTube, I plugged my ears because there's a hilarious thread. I've mentioned it before. It's great. I look at it all the time of Ohio State fans at Autzen plugging their ears. It's pretty good. Plus, the acoustics of the way Autzen Stadium helps make it loud. Please help squash all the ridiculous rumors, accusation about us pumping crowd noise through speakers and or the PA system. I can tell the difference between real crowd noise and what is fake. I was in Section 12 for the Ohio State game. Awesome show as usual. Go Ducks. Haven't heard the pumping crowd noise theory. I think that's a Twitter rabbit hole that you're going down there. But the answer is fans are very close to you. There's something about the architectural design of Autzen that allows for the noise to just cascade down onto the field. But the most important factor, the fans are all going crazy. It's not the students are going crazy and everyone else is like, oh, no, everybody is losing their minds. My dad is a great example. My dad was at the game with a couple of his college friends, one of whom played at Oregon and once, not kidding, had 10 sacks in a football game. True story. So, not a season, a game. They were there, and my dad is not what you'd call the most emotional guy out there or most expressive individual all the time. So when he's at an Oregon football game, he's usually just watching. He gets in to shout like everybody. But he said after the game, "Oh, I was yelling the whole time. I was so into it." And I think that is what makes 60,000 sound like 100,000. Everybody that went to that game, Josh Pate, or if you've seen Lucy Roden's content out there, she's pretty funny. Like she said, it's one of the best environments she's ever been to. Pate said, like everybody who goes there learns what people who haven't been there are just not aware of. That no, it's not as big as Penn State. Going to cause the same number of problems because it's every bit as loud. There's something about the way that those seats are angled. I don't know exactly what it is. I'm just kind of guessing on that. But the most important thing is that the fans are rabid as can be. It was an awesome environment. And as much as it was a showcase for Oregon football, that was a showcase for Autzen Stadium, which is, of course, an essential element of Oregon football succeeding. So I love seeing all of that. Shout was beautiful. Just absolutely beautiful. So, had a few of you ask me this question to wrap up today's show, and that's about Traeshon Holden, who issued an apology, was ejected during the game. I don't think there's anyone defending, even in the darkest corners of Twitter, what he did. Spitting on another player, not cool, man. Not cool. Guess what? He knows that. He is well aware. He got ejected from the game of Autzen Stadium's life. He was playing in it. He was making an impact. Didn't get to go. Shout out Justice Lowe, by the way, for stepping up big time. But he didn't get to do that. That is a severe punishment that he deserved. He absolutely deserved. Violated a rule. Rule says you do this, you're done. He did that, done. Not going to dispute that. I've had people ask me about what the correct level of discipline should be. And Dan Lanning said it's, something they're handling internally and they're not going to let everybody know specifically. I don't have a problem if he travels to the Purdue game. I don't have a problem if he doesn't. Here's where I come down. If Dan Lanning assesses the situation and makes a decision, I am inclined to trust him. I don't think Dan Lanning, even though he's one of the youngest head coaches in all of college football, is immature or incapable of running a program successfully, having the necessary discipline to keep his players in line, because there hasn't been some, it's not like Kirby Smart at Georgia right now, who is a heck of a football coach, but I think anybody can plainly see there's a problem down there. Something's going on. That hasn't been happening here. So there are no cracks in the dam for Dan Lanning, the CEO head coach. So whatever he feels is appropriate, I trust him. I'm good. That's fine. I'm good with that. I don't care if he says you can travel to Purdue or you're not playing for the next 4 games. I don't think it's going to be something that severe. But if he said that, I'd say that's at Dan Lanning's discretion. That's not for me to decide because I'm not in that locker room. I don't know Traeshon Holden personally. I don't know what is required to make him a better version of himself than he was in that particular moment. You know who does? Dan Lanning, the coaching staff. So whatever they decide, I think we should trust them on that. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.